me. My throat has been a little sore, and whispering can be challenging sometimes, so I hope that this honey and hot tea helps keep my whispers soft and smooth. So for today's video, we are going to talk about a case that was highly requested and voted for in a previous video that I posted. We are going to talk about the mysterious death of Netta Fornario, which is a gothic tale of magic, murder, and mystery, which was set in Iona in the 1920s. Before we jump into the video, I am going to ask my two typical requests. First request, in the comments section, you will find a pinned comment from me that will list 3 cases that I am interested in covering in the future. Please comment down below which case sounds the most interesting to you. Second and last request, if you enjoy my content, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening to my requests, and let's jump into the video. So, the mysterious death of Netta Fornario. She was found dead on the Scottish island of Iona on November 19th of 1929 at the age of 33. She was found naked, wrapped only in a black cloak, in the middle of a farmer's field, covered with scratches on her feet, with a knife nearby, and a cross cut into the hillside. The circumstances behind her death remain mysterious almost 93 years later. So it begs the question, what happened to Netta? So to start, let's talk about Iona, where she was found. Iona is a small island in the Inner Hebrides, which is about 2 kilometers or roughly 1 mile from the coast of Mull. It is about 2 kilometers wide and 6 kilometers long, with a population of just under 200 people. The main settlement, located at St. Ronan's Bay on the eastern side of the island, is called Palemore and is also known locally as the Village. The primary school, post office, the island's 2 hotels, the bishop's house, and the ruins of the nunnery can be found there. This area was a secret place for the ancient Celts and early Christians alike, being the location where the Celtic Christian illuminated manuscript, the Book of Kells, was created. The island has been visited and used for ceremonial worship long before Christianity had arrived. Now, there is no name more synonymous with the art of magic, and that's magic with a K, so that's M-A-G-I-C-K. So there's no name more synonymous with the art of magic and occultism than Aleister Crowley. He was an English ceremonial magician and prolific writer, and he was instrumental in bringing occultism and alternative thinking into the mainstream, even once being listed as one of Britain's most influential figures. Until his death in 1947 in the seaside town of Hastings, he would be associated with more than his fair share of controversy and stories, and even more so after his death. And there is one association and story, however, that is rarely heard and told, and that is his connection to Netta Fornario. Netta Fornario was born in Cairo, Egypt in 1897. She was the daughter of Nora Edith Ling and Giuseppe Nicola Raimundo Fornario, an Italian doctor and English mother. After her mother died in 1898, she was placed in the care of a well-to-do tea dealer by the name of Thomas Pratt Ling, who was her maternal grandfather, and lived with him and his family. At this time, London and the surrounding area had many occult societies and orders operating with high-ranking members of society. She became a member of the Alpha and Omega offshoot of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and this order was founded by Aleister Crowley, and she was also an officer in a co-masonry lodge in West London, which was a Freemason lodge that admitted both men and women. Members of many of these orders dedicated themselves to learning ancient magical rites, going into meditative trances, summoning spirits and demons, and participating in intricate ceremonies that could last for days. She was also suspected of being a Rosicrucian, an order claiming to possess esoteric wisdom handed down from ancient times. And that name derives from the order's symbol, which was a rose on a cross, because she had involved herself so much in the occult. In 1929, her findings would eventually take her to Iona. Nora Emily Fornario was her full name, but she went by Netta, and she became interested in the island of Iona after reading a story by her favorite author, William Sharp, which described the area as one where the fairies roam free. William Sharp was a Scottish writer of poetry and literary biography in particular, who from 1893 wrote also as Fiona Mcrae, a pseudonym kept almost secret during his lifetime. According to fellow occultist Dionne Fortune, the reason Netta was going to Iona was to conduct some deep healing and to study green ray elementals, which for non-magic folk people, that would be considered a fairy. But in the occult practice, fairies are referred to as green ray elementals. Dionne Fortune was a renowned occultist at the time and knew Netta very well. However, Dionne did go on to distance herself from Netta because she was getting too deep into things that she could not fully understand or control. Fortune was a British occultist and magician magician who co-founded the Fraternity of the Inner Light, which was an occult group based on the beliefs that had been taught to Fortune by spiritual entities known as the Ascended Masters. According to Aleister Crowley and many other occultists at the time, Iona was a crossroads, a location where one could connect to those that existed beyond the real world, known as the Thin Place. So it makes sense why Netta would want to travel here. Despite Fortune not being supportive of the lengths and depths that Netta was going to, given that she felt her skill level was not quite up to the level it needed to be to go to the depths that she was, Netta decided to still travel to Iona. So she left to take a train to Scotland and then onwards to Iona. She told her family that she was heading to the island to perform a magical healing ritual and would stay until such time that the ritual had been completed. However, she never showed any indication of returning to London and had taken many of her items with her. So it's questionable if she really ever intended to come back, or she was just expecting to stay on the island for a significant period of time. When Netta arrived on the island, most of the summer lodgers were leaving, so accommodations were rather easy for her to find. She ends up staying with the Mcrae family. The room she stayed in was part of a farm owned by Mrs. Mcrae, who mostly lived alone aside from visiting family members from the mainland. Now, according to Mrs. Mcrae, Netta had an unusual look to her. She was made up of a mixed heritage, and her clothing suggested of her involvement in this new age wave. So to the Mcrae family and other people living there, she really was a unique figure on this somewhat conservative and sparsely populated island. The Mcrae family also reported that Netta would show strange behaviors. They said that she would stay in these trance-like states, or at times seem to have a distant look in her eyes, and would sometimes speak incoherent ramblings. It was also said that her silvery jewelry would turn black. Netta would spend her days exploring the island and walking along the shorelines. When she wasn't walking around, she would enter mystical trances in the hopes of contacting the spirits beyond the Thin Place. As mentioned, Mrs. Mcrae would describe these trances that she would go into, and she would eventually claim that Netta informed her of these trances and that she gave her basically a heads up that she would enter into them, and told her that under no circumstances was Mrs. Mcrae to call for a doctor. And apparently one of these trances lasted an entire week. On one cold November morning, Mcrae noticed that Netta was more disheveled and distant than usual, and asked her what was wrong. Netta was scared of something unseen and claimed she was being psychically attacked by someone from a great distance. Psychic attacks were a widely spoken about belief in the early 20th much so that many people genuinely feared being hurt or killed by someone who could gain access in their mind. According to Dionne Fortune, it was Netta's research into psychic attacks and connections that caused her to worry so much. And at the same time, Mrs. Mcrae would start to notice that the silver jewelry that Netta wore had just turned to black overnight. And when she questioned her about it, Netta simply replied that it happened all the time and was something that she had become used to. However, she alarmed Mrs. Mcrae by telling her that she urgently needed to get off the island before it was too late. However, when she tells her that, Mrs. Mcrae informs her that there were no boats from Iona that day, and Netta would have to stay another night, and so she resigns herself to her room. This all transpires on the 17th of November in 1929. Before Netta resigns to her room, after she is found urgently packing her suitcases to leave the island, she does go wait down at the ferry port, hoping that a boat will come through to take her back to the mainland. But the ferry never comes, and then she does resign herself to the room. On the following day, the 18th of November, a member of the Mcrae family knocks on her bedroom door, but receives no reply. So they decided to enter the room. Netta's clothes, bed, and belongings were all neatly positioned and folded away, and everything looked completely normal. So they kind of felt confused at this point because nothing seemed out of place in her bedroom, but they also knew that it was uncommon for Netta to be gone on walks for many hours. After several hours had passed, the Mcrae family gathered with a group of locals to go on a search for Netta. They would scour the island, but searchers found no sign of her on the moorland or the water's edge. They had come to this illogical conclusion that Netta was no longer there and that she had simply vanished. But it wasn't until the following day, on the 19th of November, that her black-caped body was discovered by two local men, Hector McLean and Hector McNiven. She was found lying between the Mcrae and Loch Stournaig in a hollow in the moor. Also, my goodness, for my Scottish friends, if I am pronouncing any of this incorrectly, just ignore me, but also let me know how to correctly pronounce these things. Her body was said to be found next to a fairy mound, also known as fairy hills or fairy forts. These are the remains of stone circles, ring forts, hill forts, or other circular prehistoric dwellings she was running, it begs the question, where would she be running to? Or what was she running from? Although they had found her body, it didn't explain where she had been the previous day and why no one on the island discovered her. Until that moment, the coroner's report on her death could not confirm her time of death, only that it had happened sometime between the 17th and 19th of November. He concluded his report by stating that exposure to the weather was the cause of death, as there was no obvious evidence of foul play. So, according to the autopsy, the time frame is consistent with Mrs. Mcrae's report of her not being in her room, and the locals would then come forward with their own stories and versions of events, but to this day, nobody really knows what happened to Netta. One of these stories that locals came up with goes as follows. On the night of the 17th, after Netta had supposedly retreated to her bedroom, some locals claimed they had seen strange flashing lights in the sky, either blue or green. The lights were flashing over the location where Netta was eventually found, but nobody could describe exactly what they were. Others claimed to have seen a strange man dressed in a long black coat with an unrecognizable face. This man was deemed to have been a mainlander, someone not from the island, but they were unsure how he could have arrived on the island without the connecting boat service that day. Local newspaper reports at the time mention unusual letters that were of interest to police investigators. The content of these letters have never been made public, and speculation to what they contained is anyone's guess. Sadly, her family members had no interest in claiming the body, and so the islanders managed to get some funds together and have Netta buried in a small graveyard near St. Oran's Chapel on the island. So a couple questions. Did Netta prove her theory correct and enter beyond the veil to converse with the spirit people? Many people believe that this is highly unlikely, while others believe that she did in fact cross over. Did she get connected to the fairies? What actually happened? What were those potential flashing blue and green lights? There has been a claim that Netta was suffering from mental health issues which would not have been picked up back in the 1920s. As such, perhaps she became so involved in her own delusions of magic and occultism that she walked out that night preparing for a ritual and either took her own life or succumbed to the elements on top of the hill. Or perhaps there's more to that that can't exactly be explained. Also, I didn't go into this part yet, but there was a kind of like a commune of monks living on the island at the time. And the ones there at the time were devout Christians and likely would have been wary of someone nearby with pagan or occult practices. So another theory is that perhaps these monks of the island collaborated to do the unthinkable and rid themselves of a witch in their midst. From a scientific perspective, one of the theories that came into play was that Netta was actually very sick. The silver jewelry turning to black could have been a sign of acidosis, which is where the body contains too much acid as a result of diabetes. It can lead to acidic sweat and confusion. But with that said, could a diabetes-related condition really turn jewelry black. It has been known to cause discoloration in some metals, like silver. So it's a possibility, but how possible is the question? The man in the black robe also remains one of the greatest mysteries. If the local stories are to be believed, was it truly a monk from the chapel or someone dressed in a ceremonial robe from the mainland? The most bizarre theory of all is that Aleister Crowley himself had secretly traveled to Iona to kill Netta before she found out too much about the thin place. No police investigation was ever carried out, as the presiding physician noted the cause of death as heart failure from exposure, which is what her death certificate indicates. However, this explanation never satisfied someone by the name of Ron Halliday, who was a psychic investigator and author of Evil Scotland, who thinks that this death should have been properly investigated. So, 93 years later, or just approaching 93 years later at the time of this recording, we don't know what happened to Netta Fornario, and we likely will never know what happened. Was she murdered in an occult ritual? Did she take her own life? Did she succumb to the elements? Or maybe, just maybe, she succeeded in passing through to the thin place. That concludes the mysterious death of Netta Fornario. Please let me know what you thought about this case down below. I do just want to make it clear that I recognize that pagan and occult practices are a very real thing. I personally know people that engage in these practices, and I genuinely believe that there is a very unfair stereotype and assumption that people are evil that practice this. I do not think that is the case. So I just want to make that clear. If anyone here listening is a practicing pagan or any kind of religion or spirituality that is similar to that, thank you again for listening to this story. This is one of my favorite stories to date. I am fascinated by older stories, especially ones that deal with magic, and what historically is considered forbidden. Please don't forget to check out the pinned post down below. Let me know which case or cases you would like to hear in the future, and I will make a note of that and deliver.